What's happening, guys? Welcome to the social work race. Listen, this has been on my mind for a while. So what I want to do is I want to talk about something that's very sensitive to me as a social worker. And I'm going to give you my personal social worker perspective on the Shamima Begum situation. I have to look at my notes for this one because it's a lot. So, in social services, in children's services, we see children as children. And I'm going to give you a story behind that, okay? Because what has happened is worrying. We've got a lot of the country screaming at the Conservative government to make certain decisions. And I'm going to tell you what I think about that in a minute. But looking at this girl, I'm going to tell you what it means and what we've done with this story. I used to work in the youth offending service, right? And I remember there was a case that was allocated to me with a young man who was in about 3 weeks' time, he would have been 18, but he was 17. And we had a strategy meeting. And for those of you who don't know what that is, a strategy meeting is when a number of professionals come together to decide how serious a case is, if it needs to go to a Section 47 or not, investigation. But I was working with him because he was involved in offences. He was involved in robberies and so forth, but he was missing. And the thing is, when children go missing in the UK, because we have a really good system when it comes to making children a priority, okay? And I'm emphasizing this for a reason. When this young man went missing, we came together as police, health, education, social worker, social work manager, okay? That's 5, plus me, 6 people in this meeting to determine what happens next. And because he was missing for days, okay, bearing in mind he was in care, and we knew that he was being exploited by other adults, okay, we sent out search parties. And do you know what happened in this meeting? Check this out. The social worker made a mistake. The social worker said, well, he's 18 in about 3 weeks anyway, so he'll be an adult soon. By the time we do anything, he's going to be an adult. And the social work manager told off the social worker in front of everybody. Why? Because he said, he's still a child. And if it's 60 seconds to his birthday, if it's 5 minutes to his birthday, we need to make sure that we find that young man and secure him until he's 18. That's how social services see children. Remember, the young man was exploited. He was being exploited by others to commit crime. And our job is to secure him, okay? So when I worked in the youth offending service, I would have taken him for a program of reparation and restoration. That's our job, and that is in law, okay? So in the UK, we see children as children. And if adults take advantage of them and make them do whatever they do, we still see them as children. Understand what I'm saying, right? Because we have laws. I'm going to take you through some of the laws. The Children's Act, the Crime and Disorder Act means that the Youth Offending Service was created to uphold the Crime and Disorder Act, to treat young people as children and take them through a process of repair when they're off the rails, right? We've also got the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, so that children are assisted by an adult, okay? Even if they're 17 and 2 days left till their 18th birthday, they are to be treated as a child. We've got the Human Rights Act. Children have the right to be treated as children in the UK. This is deep. We've also got the Equality Act. The Youth Offending Service, they need to uphold the rights of anti-discrimination. So we can't discriminate against children or anybody, but we work with children, okay? You've got the National Referral Mechanism, which is a system, a mechanism put forward jointly with the police, so that when children commit crimes, there are considerations and programs to help them if they want to work with, because they could be, why? Exploited. And a lot of the cases put forward on the National Referral Mechanism is about children being exploited. They will be involved in selling drugs or robberies, but then they might say, well, somebody made me do it, okay? We have that. And then we've got the Legal Aid and Sentencing and Punishment of Offenders Act. And that children between the ages of 10 to 17 are treated the same. That means even if it's 10 seconds until their 18th birthday, we have these laws to protect children. And when we're talking about Shamima Begum, we're looking at a child, 15 years old, that was exploited to commit offenses against the country. And what we did was we revoked her citizenship because she left the country as a child. Remember, she's had 3 children and they've all died. She's been obviously exploited to the highest degree. And what we did was say, we don't want her back in this country. That's exactly what we did. This is worrying, all right? Because social services will, I mean, I know that we've got a national security issue here, but remember, this child, now an adult, has come to their senses a number of years ago and said, what the heck was I doing? Remember, she was being exploited, meaning that an adult influenced her as a child. And you have to imagine how many years before was she being groomed? She's been groomed and exploited for someone else's means, okay? And there's a few things that's worrying because people are celebrating that she's had her citizenship revoked. This is worrying. And I don't think that these people know what they've done. I think that the door has been opened for an attack on our civil liberties. And I don't think people who are angry, people who are nationalists, understand the implications of their decisions. When they are asking for a closure of borders, yes, you should, because every border in every country needs to be managed. But the way that nationalists and people who don't even realize that they're nationalists are screaming for justice, it worries me because I don't think they understand what they're doing to their own freedoms. Whilst they're looking at their enemy over there, I don't think they recognize that they're destroying their own freedoms. That's what makes this country great. There are flaws with the British society and the British system. Yes, massively, but it's still one of the greatest countries to be in. You're breaking down your own freedoms and you don't realize it's going to come back to bite you. All right? That's what I think. However, the government has sent a message. It sent a message to our children and a particular demographic that certain offenses, we will not consider them children. So there are other implications that have gone into play for our children. Do you notice how many times I'm using the word children? Shamima Begum was 15. Now I want you to understand, I've worked in the youth justice service for a number of years prior to becoming a social worker. And sometimes these young people commit crimes that make you not want to see them as children. But it's important to understand that we have a legal system that makes us treat them as children, in the hope that someday they will turn around their thinking. And you'll meet adults now, 23, 25-year-olds who look back and remember that they were involved in a youth justice service. They had served crimes, even adults that serve crimes, and they have gone through a process of reparation. They've recognized their wrongs and they want to turn it around. However, there are some people who don't want that for certain crimes. And I just want you to know that when you open that door, the door's now opened now, okay? We've revoked a British citizenship, even though as a child, they made a massive mistake. The point I'm making is that we have to serve our children at all times. What the government has done, sadly, is serve the anger of the people because they're afraid they won't get a vote. They know that if they support their children in the face of the increasing nationalism, that they will lose a vote. And they have opened the door and eroded our freedoms in the process of trying to do that. Well, let me tell you where I stand as a social worker. Before I even was working with youth justice, I'm probably working quite deeply and hadn't studied in the field of social care and justice and so forth. I was of the opinion that children aren't children unless they really do something that angers me. But I work with children on the other end of these problems. I work with exploitation. I've worked with exploitation for years. I know what exploitation looks like. And remember, groomers know exactly who to look for. They look for vulnerable people, okay? When you look at the young people robbing on the street, it's because someone's seen a vulnerability and have exploited it, and they use that. Yeah, they use that to get something out of them, and it's usually something offensive, and they don't care about the impact on the young person. That is worrying, okay? But when you work on the other side of it and you see that you are now tasked with the job of building back and plugging the gaps in the child's vulnerability so that when they're adults, they will live a productive life. That's my job. And if I were to take the stance, now I want you to understand, I put out this, I dealt with this in probably, about a year and a half ago, this Shamima Begum issue. And I was saying that exactly what I'm saying now, that she's our child, whether we like what she did or not, and the country should get behind her to repair. But actually, they want her head rolling on a block. They want her to be burnt. They want her to be punished. And that's worrying from human beings who think that they are in a place of justice and righteousness. It worries me that we will treat our children this way. And I think a great mark of how civilized we are as a nation is determined by how we treat our disabled and how we treat our children. So what am I saying? As a social worker, my job is to see them as a child. When I was uneducated and when I wasn't exposed to the system, I didn't think like that. But you have to work in the system to know what I'm talking about. What I'm saying is that the government has also now, as a result of that decision, added to a rhetoric, one that is based on discrimination, prejudice, and also racism. It is now contributed to that. And in some ways, I think if you were about doing the right thing, it would have been about taking care of her and restoring it in the face of opposition, knowing that you lose a vote. The right thing to do is the right thing to do. But it's also a situation that makes me think, well, my government has done wrong for the vote, to gain the vote, to curry favor. It also gives me reason to think that there's a conspiracy to divide the country further, because all it does is it fuels the nationalist view, gives them a sense of strength. Now, I haven't really got much of a problem with nationalism, apart from the issue that there's a lot of racism that sits in that field. And me as a social worker, I have to preempt that. And so what I'm saying to the government, I'm saying to the people, I'm saying to everyone listening to this, that justice is an ugly decision sometimes. And we should seek to look after our children and not see them as adults. One of the situations that we have a problem with in this country is that there are certain demographics that have been adultified. Now, if you don't know what that means, it's something that we need to talk about deeper in another episode. Adultification of young people, and it typically happens to Black boys when they commit crimes. So they can be 13, 14 years old, even 15, and they will be seen as older than they are by their white ruling counterparts, the authorities. That's something to do with psychology, but it happens. And so young people then on that basis will suffer harsher sentences for the same offenses. We are still seeing it today. Statistically, it's still a massive problem where young Black boys or Black children will suffer, Black teenagers will suffer harsher penalties for the same offenses as their white counterparts. That is still an issue today, even in the adult world where we are being given harsher penalties, both here, throughout Europe and America. It's still a massive problem. And what I'm saying is that what the government has done has contributed to that. It doesn't see Shamima Begum as a child that was exploited. It sees Shamima Begum as a result of its decision, it sees her as someone who's capable of making their own decisions. Well, if that's the case, why don't we treat all our children like that in this country, whatever race they are? Let's treat them all the same. So if a young white male was to do something against the country or kill, like they killed our colleague, social worker, why don't we go and string him up, or why don't we lock him up in prison for that and treat him like an adult? Do you know what I mean? So what I'm saying is, how far do we want to go with this? Who's gonna put who's gonna set the boundary? Who's gonna set the benchmark? Shamima Begum made some serious mistakes as a child, and she should be treated as such. Welcome to the Social Work Race podcast.